morning and welcome. This is Sunrise Daily. I'm Ayo Makinde.
Yes, it's a beautiful Friday morning. I'm Kayode Okikere.
Yeah, out here in Lagos.
Oh, yes.
Where Ogun Yusuf?
All right, I was expecting that, and this is Abuja.
We're letting it rest for today. We'll pick it up on Monday.
Okay, well, let's just go straight to look at what the papers are saying. Well, always too many issues to address. A number of them that have trended over time. Two that include money that interest me, and in my mind, I'm just hoping and praying that at any time government puts out word, people will understand what they're saying, and there will be no ambiguity. On the one hand is, for how long have we talked about the loans to being too much, and are they sustainable? We hear it's still within the threshold, and then the Senate was reported on Wednesday that the Senate approved another set of external loans for federal government and states, and then we hear continually about this 60 billion naira printed or not printed. The National Executive Council has also said that there was no such thing as printed, but one of the members of that meeting, that council, was the one that said that money was printed. So it will be good to just hear, indeed, put out the right words so that there is no ambiguity and people are not left guessing.
Well, I think it's one thing to put out the right words. It's another thing. The government is not the only working engine or working think tank in the country. That's why there's a government, there's opposition, there is a people, there's the corporate sector, and different sectors. They have their thinking, they have way they see things. So government might say, well, deficit budgeting is the way to go, and the best way to raise funds is to get loans. And they'll tell you, well, our debt to GDP ratio is not that bad. But then you see some other people that will tell you, what about the debt to revenue generation ratio? How do we plan to pay back if we're not making as much anyway? So the debate will be ongoing, definitely. But I think it's important to keep having these conversations because, as they say, no man is an island. No government is an island. So that conversation will always be ongoing. No matter what the government says, there will be people that will tell you, I think it's better you do it that way. And I think it's important for government to always, give it some listening ears because it's important to get these ideas together. I don't think any right-thinking Nigerian will be excited that where we are today. We're recovering from a recession. So it's important to keep having those conversations so that we can make the best choice. Markwe, what do you think?
About borrowing and deficit.
Oh, yes.
I don't know if you listened to Mr. Laolo Akonde giving out the information from the NEC meeting yesterday as to whether or not printing of money was done by the CBN to meet allocations for the month of March. I don't know if it was more specific about the month of March or whether it's ever been done, but I think what I heard was something about the month of March. And from the communique he read out, NEC agreed, or NEC said that, no such thing was done after listening to briefings from the CBN and the Minister of Finance. But are we in dire straits is the key question. I think anyone whom you ask will definitely agree with you that we are in dire straits. The DG Budget, when he came here, didn't mince words. And he said that, has it been done in the past, or, has money been printed, has quantitative easing been done to try and meet revenue or augment revenue shortfalls? And he did acknowledge that has happened in the past. So I don't know why the big controversy is about this 60 billion naira printing of currency. Well, yes, it is important that facts be set straight, but I think the bigger question is whether or not Nigerians are apprehensive as to the value of their currency, especially in the current economic situation. And the truth of the matter is, a lot of people are. When you look at what happened to the currency from early last year to this year, the naira has lost about 100 naira at the minimum. And that is if we don't look at all the other times that it has lost up to 150 naira. depreciated by that value to the dollar. You have to ask questions as to what exactly are we doing to kickstart production. Because I think that for a lot of people, that's where the question is. What are we going to do? Because initially it would seem that the interest rates were they were high for business people, but they were lucrative for those who had money and just wanted to keep their money maybe in fixed money instruments, so to speak, because the interests were so lucrative that it did not make any sense to go and put your money in an industry. But now that the interest rates have dropped a great deal, don't forget that savings accounts have little or nothing on them. Treasury bills, not as lucrative as they used to be. Mutual funds where people used to keep their money, not doing so well as well. The question is, what have they now? Have they been able to move monies from those things that used to take their money to the real sector, which is where we need to kickstart production to get the Naira going and also ensure that there is some production going on and people have jobs? Has that been able to happen? What do we need to do as a people? Let's not forget also the impacts of Corona. We cannot deny that. But so far, so good. Have we seen the enthusiasm, the drive? Maybe in some quarters. Is it enough? I don't think we've seen it in many quarters. And I worry more because 2023 is approaching. We're still in 2021, but the politicians are already behaving as if we were in 2022. So, I don't know, if we don't get any job started this year, very little time is left for us to be able to do much before another election cycle comes. And then you know what happens in election cycle? You know, lots of money is shared, money is pumped into the economy, inflation runs away even further. I don't know, it's very complex. But I think that, we need to find a way to get those who need to do something, to take action, see the seriousness of where we currently are, so that we do not go down the path that Zimbabwe or Venezuela once went. Gentlemen.
When you raise these issues, Malpa, there is only one thing that comes to mind, and that is it possible for us to do without taking loans? The answer is yes. Have we done all the things that are trickling away our resources? The Auditor General's report of so many years comes to mind. We have a humongous youth asset in the country. Have we galvanized? The question is out there. But then, let's just go straight to the papers this morning and see what they are saying. Malpa, you want to take the lead off?
I want to, start with bad news, but hey, look at this. Insecurity. Our nation is bleeding now. That's what the Vanguard has on the front page. That was from the defense minister, to continue with this briefing by the ministers happening at the villa. And I think it was the turn of the defense minister yesterday to take questions from journalists. And he had this to say: our nation is bleeding now. Says death of Chadian leader has security implications. Federal government beefing security in border areas. Government compiling report on political, religious, ethnic opponents. Confirms arrest of Boko Haram sponsors in Kano. Bandits attack Kaduna hospital. Kidnap 2 nurses. We have epidemic of kidnappings and abductions, as according to the NMA president. And traditional ruler, 5 others killed in Benue. So as if to buttress what the defense minister is saying, you have all of these riders attached to that particular headline. Our nation is bleeding now. Well, you have other stories at the bottom here. Those attacking police formations, killing policemen, may soon turn on people. That's according to Southeast governors. Buhari government stands behind Pantami. That's according to the presidency. DSS disowns Amakri, says his views were personal. Well, you might want to read all the details on page 3. Who is speaking on behalf of the presidency? We don't know. You might want to flip to page 8 to see who is speaking, because the last we heard from the Minister of Information when he was asked by pressmen, he said FEC didn't discuss it. Look at all the stories here. Oluwabori stool. Okowa sues for peace, urges aggrieved persons to sheath swords. That's also there. No money was printed to shore up March allocation. That's from NEC. And financial autonomy, why we won't suspend strike, Jusun tells CJN. So the battle is still on. Mr. and Mrs. is on the front page this morning. Maybe something to lighten your day. Dear, we're already late for the party. All these exterior decorations, in parenthesis, on your face, are time wasting. That's from Mr. And Mrs. says, oh, it's a waste of time, eh? Let me catch you staring at other ladies at the party. Well, that's how it goes. Men sometimes get impatient about face decorations, eh? Vanguard Sports is on the back page for those who will be very interested in sports. Let's look at this for you. Igalo can't teach Osimhen Iheanacho how to strike. You also have this one. NWFL Super 6, Bielsa Edo crash out, Aduku sacked. And Klinsmann keen to replace Mourinho at Tottenham. Let us see how that goes with the special one. Let's leave it there for Vanguard.
I'm not even going to say anything about that, Mr. and Mrs., because I don't want to come into that court this morning. Let's flip to the Nigerian Tribune, and it leads with the same comment from the defense minister. Nigeria is bleeding, says FG compiling report on political, religious, ethnic opponents. That's in parentheses. Monarchs, 3 others killed in Benue. Army closes Niger camp as bandits abduct 15. Oh my God. In fresh attack. Police dismiss report on abduction of 18 passengers in Ibarakwa. PDP laments fresh killings in Zamfara. Gunmen abduct 2 nurses inside hospital in Kaduna. All of these you find on the front page of the Nigerian Tribune this morning. And of course, you still have that alleged link to terrorist groups. Buhari's government stands behind Pantami. That's story continues on page 30 of the paper this morning. Right under the big story, you also have tributes galore at Odumakin's lying in state. And right beside the big story, among others there, drama as imported American cow breaks loose at Lagos airport. What? I'm wondering. But it's right there on page 27 of the Nigerian Tribune this morning. Sports on the back
no
page.
going back for that cow. So you better just get used to it.
Did he come as a tourist or something?
I doubt it. Definitely not.
No, no. What's that thing you do when you just come into a country for the reason of COVID-19?
Oh, no quarantine.
No quarantine.
Oh, well, I mean, it's agriculture, right? And you know, it speaks volumes because The Guardian leads with something related. I mean, we've talked about inflation, how food inflation is driving the inflation figures you see. So maybe this might explain why we are where we are. As they say, Southeast farmers score anchor borrowers program low. Blame failure on late arrival of imputes herdsmen attacks. Cite disregard for comparative advantage in crop selection. Name beneficiaries, amount involved. Union challenges CBN. Abia official says some farmers saw loan. Now listen to this. Saw the loan as largesse. Yeah. Ebonyi claims it had to settle loans for defaulting farmers, and just to cap it up, CBN not responsible for farmers' failure, says Apex Bank official. So it's a lot, really, but it has direct impact on, I mean, what we eat, how much you buy what you eat, especially for that area, and largely the inflation figures we're seeing. So these are the challenges, really, and I think it's important to tackle them at this point. And the big picture shows the Lagos Airport Link Bridge at Toyota bus stop, which was abandoned by the federal government. And seeing airport just reminds me of what a lot of people had to go through yesterday, early yesterday at the Lagos Airport, you know, flights delayed and all that. Right under that, you see Chad on edge for Debbie's burial as rebels threaten advance. Now, you might think this is just Chad alone, but you know this will have some implication on Nigeria's fight against insurgency. But civil riders, AU delays decision as France backs Chad's military takeover. Well, that's what they see it as, a military takeover. FG beefs up border, says killing of Chadian leader dims Nigeria's security situation. Buhari meets northern governors over insecurity, and U.S. advises citizens against traveling to 14 states. Group calls for a national consultative assembly to address insecurity. So it's a lot, really. It starts on the front page, continues on page 4. Let me just give you this one before I flip it back to Abuja. 60% of Nigerians lack access to smartphones, digital devices. So 60%. Who is saying that? Whatever happened to that coverage? Is it the broadband penetration? How will people use that broadband if they don't have access to smartphones? But the question you naturally ask is, do they actually need the smartphones? Is that their primary need when you look at their hierarchy of needs? It's a lot, really. So I'll let you feast on that on page 4.
That's actually a lot of thing being said there, because if on the one hand we're looking at digital penetration, we're looking at mobile telephony, mobile everything, we're looking at cashless policy, cashless economy and all, and this is the challenge we have on our hands. A good number of things are responsible. How far have we gone about the right-of-way conversations, from state to state, and how easily are we able to protect the infrastructure of the telecom companies, as I said?
Well, I think it speaks volumes. Maybe they can't afford it. I mean, you can't blame them. But you know what? The Guardian has it for you this morning.
Oh, yeah, I mean, let's just leave it there.
Let's flip this back to Abuja. Markwe.
Well, let's quickly look at Daily Trust for you. They also have this very worrying headline. Federal government, Nigeria is bleeding. Fingers political ethno-religious leaders. Tell us their real names. ACF, Afenifere, challenged defense minister. Northern governors meet Buhari. Gunmen on the prowl kill several in Benue, Edo rivers. That's what you find on the front page. Knox kudos as APC kicks against fresh petrol price hike. Okay? This is APC now, kicking against fresh petrol price hike. It's on page 34, not the PDP. Let that sink in, please. Look at this one, just beneath the nameplate. Alleged link to terrorists. We stand behind Pantami. That's according to the presidency. So it would seem, indeed, that silence has been broken by the presidency on this one. Mum is no longer the word. You might want to flip to page 32 to see just what grounds they're standing on to say they support the minister. 60 buried as death toll in Zamfara attacks rises. It's a page 32 read for you. You have a number of other stories under the bottom here, at the bottom here. Nigeria overtakes Congo, worst in global electricity access. I don't know what's going on with electricity supply in your area. Do you want to drop a word on that on our social media handles? Federal government fixes 6-week timeline for passport processing. Well, page 32 read as well. Let's leave it there for Daily Trust.
Oh, what do you expect to hear, Mark, about the electricity question that you've asked, but you will get answers. New Telegraph is next, and this is the lead. Ambassadorial clearance. Disquiet as Olonishaki, Buratai, others await postings. I have a few riders. FG shortlisting ally countries for ex-service chiefs to avoid rejection. That one is parentheses, find out what it's about. They can either be accepted or rejected, Professor Akinterewa. And why NAS may invite ex-military chiefs over $1 billion arms fund. All of that story you'll find on page 2 of the paper this morning. Right beside the picture you see on the front page, no money was printed for March allocations, and that's according to NEC, endorses recommendation for state police. Federal policing system frustrating governors. That's ascribed to the governor of Lagos State, Sanwo-Olu. And right under that one, Pantami, Nigerians fret over 51 million NIN database. Allegations against minister threatens NIN-SIM linkage exercise. Pantami made enemies by putting people first, says presidency. find out what all of that is about this morning on the front page of the New Telegraph.
We'll see how Nigerian News Direct couches that one. Early age utterance. Well, that's right. That's how News Direct says it. Presidency rejects call for Pantami's removal, lists milestones as minister. And a writer, Khan warns against linking Yakowa's death to minister. So it's another page in this unfolding drama, story, debates, call it whatever you want to, but this is another page, and we'll just see how this one plays out today. It's on page 2, by the way. And right on top of the nameplate, there's been a lot of talk, like Marpa referenced, about power. So let us know. In fact, I'm probably going to head there to our Twitter handle to speak about my own experience as well.
No, you always have a lot to say.
Oh, absolutely. NDPHC BDC to deliver 250 megawatts stranded power. Just how far will that go? Will that even touch on what you're experiencing? Well, we'll find out. And just one more. You see, how we spend 2.3 trillion naira COVID-19 funds. That's coming from the FG. So there's been a lot of clamor for transparency. Just how did this happen? So seems there's been some explanation from the federal government. It's a page 2 read for you on the Nigerian News Direct this morning. Makwe.
I think that will be all for the papers this morning, gentlemen.
Still have one or two here in Lagos. Blueprint, for instance.
That's Lagos for you, right?
What are you trying to say?
The options are endless.
Okay. Niger, Kaduna, Oyo. Bandits sack another military base, attack hospital, abduct 2 nurses and 33 others. Gunmen kill 5 in Benue, Edo, scores injured. Buhari condoles with Zamfara as death toll hits 83. Why I stopped negotiating. Subscribe to Gumi. Find out the details on page 6. FG tightens security over Chad political instability. To check influx of refugees and weapons, says attacks on military police won't be tolerated. Find out the details of all of that on the front page of the Nigerian News Direct this morning.
Oh, you mean the blueprints, right?
Beg your pardon, blueprints.
Well, the Daily Times is next. Let's run through it for you. Anxiety in a Shekiri land over whereabouts of Olu's crown. Oh, dear. That one's on page 2. Oh, that's another twist, right? And you see the Olu of Warri crisis right under the big picture. Police invite powerful chief over crisis in Warri Kingdom. And just to tell you what that picture is about on the front page, you see the Lagos State Governor, Babajide Sanwo-Olu, you see the House of Reps Speaker, Femi Gbajabiamila, you see Pastor Ito Agodalo, during the line in state service of songs and tributes for the late activist spokesman of Afenifere, Comrade Yinka Odumaki. It was a very touching one, and that's what you see right there in that picture. Well, let's leave it there for the Daily Times newspaper.
A quick look at the Leadership Friday. This is what you will find on the front page of Leadership. It is also related that's it, there you go. Outrage over kidnap of nurses in Kaduna Hospital. That story, you'll find the details on page 4. Abductors demand 200 million naira ransom. How I escaped. Another nurse. That's what you have right there on the front page of the paper this morning. And this is without concession, especially about the last one, about, that's...
In the private university.
Private university.
And then the one in Afaka, School of Forestry.
Well, that's the most we can take of the papers this morning. We're back in a moment. Do stay with us.
Well, you have seen the headlines. They're pretty clear and very categorical as to the statement of the Defense Minister from the briefing which you just watched, Nigeria is bleeding, is what they all had on the front page. And I know watching my colleague last night, Kimbaloye, and some analysts saying Nigeria is bleeding. What should be done? Because if a patient is bleeding and nothing is done to stop the bleed, it could be fatal. But this morning, we have with us retired Major General Henry Ayola, who is a former commander of the Special Task Force Operation Safe Haven. We're going to be asking him just how bad is this bleed. General, welcome to Sunrise Daily.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning, viewers.
Well, when you saw that, I don't know, when you heard the statement of the defense minister, did it come, I don't know, nothing new to you, was it?
Not really. I think it's just one way of describing the state of security in the nation right now.
You do agree with him that Nigeria is bleeding?
Oh, if there is a stronger word than bleeding, maybe it will be more appropriate.
How bad is it?
Well, I mean, at a point, I think I made this point on this platform before, that it's like the whole hell is let loose upon Nigeria. Because the avalanche of security challenges, taking place and happening to us concurrently, is very unusual. It's very, I mean, sometimes you have to pause and ask, I mean, could this be an expression of displeasure from the divine towards us, or could it be some self-inflicted problems on our part, or could it be having not paid the price initially, we are paying the price eventually? Things that ought to have been done in the 60s, in the 70s, in the 80s, which we didn't do up to now. So it's a whole range of things involved. So, of course, if you say Nigeria is bleeding, yeah, that's one good way of describing it. Yeah.
From the different, how will I put it now? Is it theories now that you have put out there? I imagine that when you sit, I mean, as somebody who has served meritoriously in the Nigerian military for years, when you try to analyze all of these issues, you also seem to be at a loss. But what do you find is your best explanation for all that is going on, the simultaneous attacks that we seem to be experiencing on almost every front? Each one seems to be peculiar, or do you see a common thread running through it all?
Yeah, like I said, if you look at, if we try to make a list, for example, the Boko Haram situation is there. Then, of course, there are other security issues that were not even as conspicuous as banditry, kidnapping, raping, sacking farmers from their farms, and all of these. There are things like drug addiction, drug misuse, small, gangsterism, things like that, simple ones that are happening at local levels. Okay, so in crisis management, we are trained to find solutions. Most of what we have seen is highlighting the problems. So what is the solution? We have prescribed so many things. Sometimes I'm beginning to sound like a broken record myself because I don't know who's listening really. I mean, sometimes when I'm called to discuss this, I'm a little pensive as to what am I coming to say that I've not said before. Because, I mean, there are things that can be done at all levels. So it's like, who is to do them? Where do there has to be a convergence of efforts where we can then distribute tasks accordingly, and so everybody can be working. I've not seen that kind of move. So most of what we do either it's town hall meetings or conferences or dialogues, whatever we call it, we do a lot of highlighting of the problems. Some of the solutions that have been preferred from these past meetings, we don't know whether anybody is working on them or not. Okay, of course, granted, I'm sure there are people who are working. Maybe the results are not yet visible. Aha. But I think we have to keep talking, we have to keep advising, we have to keep suggesting, So I think that's where we find ourselves. But we are not helpless, really. We are not helpless. There's still so much more that can be done.
The question is, well, you have said the solutions have been proffered. But for the problem itself, would we say that we have been able to diagnose it properly? Because, as you pointed out, some people might agree with you or might say, okay, maybe this is something we've left undone that has now grown into a monster and is biting us in the bum, or maybe some divine is actually not unhappy with us, and maybe we need to cleanse the land. Because really, how do you explain all that we have seen in the southwest of the country, which had enjoyed some relative peace? There is some mumblings, agitations already happening there as well. In the southeast, we've seen an onslaught on security operatives. This, is a different type of it's a different type of yes, a different type of security challenge. Yeah. In the northeast of the country, we've been at that one, the challenge of insurgency now, for over 12 years. And it doesn't seem like it's abating. There's anything, we're now facing a bigger risk as a result of the death of President of Chad, Idris Deby. That is also another potential problem that could aggravate what is happening in the northeast of the country. In the northwest of the country, we've had to deal with banditry, with different types of solutions. It would seem that we've not even been able to agree on what needs to be done to stem the situation. But some people are saying, if we all agree that this is criminality, why is it so difficult for us to apply the solution that we think should be applied to criminals?
Yeah, thank you very much. That's a food for thought for every one of us. In fact, my concerns come from, is it possible that we fought the Civil War better than we are fighting the array of challenges we have right now? Because that's what it looks like. There were things that were done during the Civil War to solve that problem. Is it that we didn't learn any lessons from those? Because I don't even see us putting up half the effort of what was put up to fight the Civil War. So you begin to ask yourself, so have we advanced as a people? If what we did well some 40 years or more ago, we cannot repeat it, we cannot even do better now. So that's the issue. And of course, until a problem is seen jointly, collectively, as a national problem, I think that is a major difference I've seen. At the beginning, some part of the country felt, oh, the problem is not here, it's there, it's them there. So it was not our problem until it began to spread. And now it's all over the nation. So I think by now it should be clear to all of us that it is our problem, it's a national problem. And so we should give it a national, attack, putting all things, bringing all means to bear.
But why do you say it's a national? I mean, of course, the problems are now nationally spread. But when you say that, some people saw it as, the problem of some other people rather than their problem. Yeah. And you say now the problem has spread. Is it that one problem? Because I want to believe that the major problem which you referred to is the Boko Haram insurgency. Is that the problem which has now degenerated into what the rest of the country is experiencing?
No, not at all. Let me take you back. You made a point about defining the problem. You see, not just defining the problem. When you diagnose the problem, you define, you have to dimension the problem appropriately. Because if not, you could be attacking a different problem and not the one you intend to attack. So all of that has not come to focus all along before. But I think now, it should be clear enough now that instead of dismissing the problem or evading the problem, which is one of the approaches we've always used, or simply just treating it scantily or just, pushing it off you, but we need to decisively attack the problem now. But in doing that, we need to mobilize the entire nation. We need to create a sense of urgency for everybody. and bring all the agencies, I have always advocated an all-stakeholder approach to solving problems. Nigerian we are all stakeholders in the enterprise called Nigeria, and we all have a stake in it. In the final analysis, we all be losers if this nation goes down. Either the apparent villains or the seeming victims, we all be losers. So it calls from an all of society approach, for us to attack this problem. And that means everybody bringing on board what he has. I've said that again and again. But I've not seen actions that is bringing. Of course, I've seen meetings, town hall meetings, seminars, and all of that. And most of the time, the people in those seminars and meetings are not the actors. They are not the ones who are supposed to act on the proposals that are coming out from those meetings. So again, you ask yourself, I was listening to the Minister of Information yesterday about the town hall meeting they had in Kaduna, and he was making the point that, yeah, he is planning to put it forward to the Council of State and the Federal Executive Council and all that. Yeah, we need that. So that let it come to the table of those who need to act. So that it's not just individuals, communities, and as societies and organizations just preferring solutions, and they are not the ones to act on those solutions. So I think that will help us. That will help us. Perhaps maybe we should even set up a committee or a national committee that will garner all the solutions that are coming out. Look, there's hardly anything in Nigeria that has not been researched into at one time or the other. If you go to some of our shelves, there are fantastic reports of researches that have been done over the years concerning different challenges. So, I mean, NIBS is there. They submit every year a paper to the presidency. They take a problem, a national problem, they do a whole lot of analysis, do study, and present a solution. So what are we doing with all that? What are we doing with the ones coming out of the National Defense College, coming out from different institutions? So it's not lack of solutions that is our problem. Sometimes either we don't have sufficient will to tackle particular problems, maybe for some other unknown, unstated reasons, but the solutions are there.
But General, even though yes, you have put forward your own solutions many times, and you also believe that the solutions already are there for those who seek answers. Just for the benefit of our viewers and for those who might just be watching for the very first time, give us a sense of your concerns as to what could happen now that the president of Chad is dead and he's been succeeded by his son.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk on that. Let me start by offering my condolences to the family of the late president of Chad, to the government and the people of Chad, to the people of West Africa and Africa as a whole, because we must give it to late President Deby. He was such a stabilizing force within our sub-region, particularly within the Sahel, and West Africa in particular, and up to Central African Republic, of course, where he also had his hand in some pie there. The implications are so far-reaching. You see, when you have a strong leader like that, more often than not, it's at the expense of strong institutions. So for me, the first lesson for us as a nation is to highlight the importance of building strong institutions, which is a major component of a system or a system of systems that nations ought to run. Nations that are strong are nations that have done that have built system of systems, strong institutions, structures, processes, procedures, checklists for doing things. I've said this again and again, okay? Not individual strong persons and strong leaders. Of course, like I said, we must give it to him. He obviously was a strong leader. But then, if we look at the implication, let's start from Chad itself. Haven't had such a strong leader. His absence is going to create a major vacuum. Now, you've seen that the son, it's 37-year-old officer, is the one taking over from the father, a 69-year-old late president. Now, I mean, no matter how smart this guy can be, there certainly will be some areas that he doesn't have the requisite experience to handle. Okay? But that's not even the issue. Is that what their constitution says? I found out that there is no...
They put it in abeyance.
They don't have a vice president.
They put the constitution in abeyance.
No. The constitution itself is even contrived. How can you have a constitution that gives the president power to appoint a vice president? So if he refuses to appoint, then there's no vice president. And that's what has happened. You give a president, he has the power to appoint a vice president, so which he had not appointed. The Senate or the National Assembly had not been convened, had not been, inaugurated. So there's a serious vacuum, and that's why the military had to come in and put the song forward. So you can see the institution not being strong, not being there on ground. And that has created that vacuum. So again, that tells you that it's going to engender a lot. And don't forget, he died in a battle against these people called FARC, FCCC, the Front for Change and Concord in Chad, who are mercenaries leaving Libya to come back home. And because they've gotten used to power, they have so much armament and all that. They want to come back home in power. That's the problem. And the same way he fought last year, between March, April last year, when he fought Boko Haram, drove them out of their territory back into Nigeria. Of course, I mean, I would say he's a soldier of soldiers, and I think the spirit of that soldier of soldier had overtaken his, his passion that he had to do it again, and this time it ended up this way. So, with these people coming back home, and then knowing that the president who was destabilizing power, who was able to checkmate a lot of the security issues the nation had been suffering, is now gone, they'll be emboldened to say, wow, this is a good chance for them. And that cuts across not just Chad. That takes us to, if we look at the Sahel, the whole of the Sahel, the G5, Burkina Faso, Chad, Mali, Niger, and what the fifth one? Yeah, all of them. He also was one of the strongest, in that group. The same way, if we look at West Africa, the Multinational Joint Task Force, which we are championing, was moved to N'Djamena, when this administration came in 2015. And that's because our president must have seen, President Deby as a very good ally. And I want to use this opportunity also to commiserate with our president. But remember, he visited our president about 3 weeks ago. And that shows they have a good, rapport. And of course, he would have been a very good ally, even in fighting Boko Haram, putting his efforts through the Multinational Joint Task Force, and then working with our own troops on ground in the Northeast. Okay, so it's a great loss for us. But beyond that, now when we realize that most of the challenges we have relating to banditry, rebels coming from Libya, Mali, Chad, Niger, he was like a blocking force in reducing the infiltration of these arms, small arms and light weapons, which we're already complaining about. Now with him out of the scene, I fear that there may be an increase of such movements. Because you see, once a strong person leaves like that, people get emboldened to start doing all kinds of things they were not doing before. So we need to start thinking about that. We need to start thinking about his role in the Multinational Joint Task Force. Nigeria has been championing most of them. He's been the closest to contributing, both contributing troops and resources to that force. Do
you think that we have been positioned properly, though? Because the first thing that came to my mind also is the fact that the current Chief of Defense Staff, served in the Multinational Joint Task Force, and he even headed it at some point. Yeah. Do you think that with his own experience and the relationship that, he must have built with the other countries who contributed to the Multinational Joint Task Force, we do have some leverage of some sort to be able to, now that we have been forewarned by the death of the president, and we know that, this could have grave implications, we do have some leverage somewhere with his own experience?
Yeah, we do. I mean, obviously at a personal level, perhaps, but the contribution of each country to the Multinational Joint Task Force is also a function of how strong that country is. How do they do with their own internal crisis? In fact, what is likely to happen, and it's a great possibility, that even Chad himself will become more inwardly drawn with the challenge that now they are going to be facing. They cannot be throwing their weights all around the regions like they were doing before. So the tendency is that they're going to become inwardly drawn and focused and maybe withdraw some of their contributions from this other, multinational joint task force, their contribution to the G5 in the Sahel and all of that.
But it could also have implications for, I mean, if the country is not stable, that of course naturally has implications for us. The humanitarian, there could be an attendant humanitarian crisis.
Of course.
Is it something that we will be prepared for, considering just how in dire straits we are in that region as well?
Yeah, just about a week ago, I was speaking on one platform, and I was referring to the, we used to have Presidential Committee on Small Arms and Light Weapons, which has been, we're in the process of turning it to a commission, okay? We should have been activated by now to start handling the issue of these weapons all over the place that are infiltrated. Now, if you now add the issue of refugees that are likely to spill over, we pray that it doesn't happen, that there will be stability within. Well, maybe with the military being there, they will be there for 18 months, like they said, to plan for the next elections. Maybe that will help. I pray that it does, so that we don't have their own instability. Obviously, we touch on our own security challenges. So we hope that. But of course, it's important for us to start putting some contingency plan in place as to how to handle possible spillover of refugees from Chad to us, increase the movement of small arms and light weapons. We have to put up some contingency plan for that immediately.
You had the Senate intervention. I hate to interrupt your thoughts, but you had the Senate intervention. There are about 500 million small and light weapons, and of that figure, about 300 million of them are in Nigeria alone, in the hands of non-state actors. What did you make of that figure when you saw it, though?
Well, there are all kinds of estimates. It depends on which body, gave that out. But, I mean, it's obvious, unless somebody does a study, a deliberate study. But, of course, there are bodies, world bodies, who monitor these things, and they can give those figures. Of course, with what we are experiencing, it's obvious that, of course, there are too many arms all over the place, and they're in the hands of the wrong people. Since, I mean, we've been in this situation for a while. Once the nation loses that monopoly of the use of force to non-state actors, it's a serious problem. And that's why we have to start doing something about that. Disarmament and, all kinds of programs that we can do to get these arms off the wrong hands.
So would you say, I know that you are trying to give solutions as to what we need to be doing. You're saying we should be monitoring the, flow of small and light weapons. We should have a contingency plan and we should activate it. But I don't know if you still had more to add to that.
Yes. I was also looking, I guess we must have been doing that on the diplomatic front. How to help the current government, the interim government that will be in charge, to really stabilize the nation. I'm sure the diplomatic cycle will be thinking about that.
That will be in our own enlightened
self-interest. Yes. Because if we don't do that, if we wait for the effects to come, it will be too late. So we need to do that up front, And
when you talked about disarmament, just quickly, a thought occurred to me as to what was happening in Zamfara, where when banditry broke out, the solutions which we thought, because if you also look, there have been disparity in terms of how to go about, confronting these people. We saw that Zamfara adopted disarmament, so to speak, and compensation method. If you put
cash for arm.
Cash, exactly. Solution. What are your thoughts on that? And do you think that is the way to go about disarmament?
Yeah, it's one way. There are many ways and means and methods of implementing disarmament. You use all kinds of baits, carrot and stick and all of that, to attract people to be willing to submit their weapons. But then there are certain conditions precedent that will encourage such people. So you have to create those conditions. You have to know the real root of the problem and show them promise that you have taken care of that problem. Then they will be more willing to give up. Because a couple people take up arms to increase their own confidence, not just for safety, for survival in some cases. Okay, so if you don't give them the promise that you'll be responsible for their survival, for their safety and security, of course, they will not be willing. I mean, it's an inherent right of self-defense. And, self-preservation is the first instinct of man. So They won't be. Even when they pretend to bring, sometimes they bring the useless things and say they have submitted them. They are still keeping the very useful ones.
General, you are a general. You definitely know what is useless. We'll take a break at this point, and we'll come back, of course, to continue our conversation. Please stay with us. Retired Major General Henry Ayola is still with us in the studio, and we're discussing matters pertaining to security. We'll now flip this to Lagos for the questions of my colleagues. Gentlemen.
Well, thank you very much, Mark. Major General, just staying on that Chad situation for a bit, there are a lot of countries that are a bit, hesitant. I hope you can hear me, General. There's some countries that are a bit hesitant on how to approach Chad in the light of, recent events. Some are saying, well, we'll wait to watch. Some even call it a coup. But for Nigeria, we're neighbors, and we don't have that luxury. So if you could just maybe give some advice to the government, how do we approach the relationship with Chad now? I know the Borno State governor has, said that we should have more cooperations across the region. But now that this has happened, how should the Nigerian government approach the relationship with Chad?
Yeah, thank you very much. I had earlier mentioned this morning that, that as part of a contingency plan of the country, we should be thinking of a diplomatic assistance kind of program with Chad to help the interim government to stabilize the nation, preemptively, so that we don't have to suffer any spillover effect if instability becomes the order of the day. So it should be part of it. It should be, that also should bring to light the need to revisit our border security. We should put that in place also. Whatever plan was there before, I think it's a time to activate so that we can act preemptively.
I've always wondered, General, you have a lot of these things happening in Nigeria blamed on what's happening in Libya, what has happened in Libya. And I keep wondering, you have Tunisia, Algeria, Egypt, closely bordering Libya. Nigeria is like a country or two countries away from Libya, yet we feel that effect compared to Algeria, Egypt, and the rest. They don't have to fight, insecurity, insurgency on this scale, and they are closely bordered by Libya. So what are they maybe doing, or what is different, really?
Yeah, rebels will naturally gravitate towards where they will have less resistance. It's a natural thing for them. Number one, this Front for Change and Concord of Chad, FCCC, they are majorly Libyans and majorly Chadians who went as mercenaries to Libya. And now that the UN has signed an agreement for all foreign military groups to leave Libya, that's why they have decided to come back home. Okay. Now, of course, in coming back home, if they get resistance in Chad, they will think of what alternative nearby countries to go to. And with the conditions precedent right now, prevalent within our own territory, and the readiness of being able to either join forces with the whatever faction of Boko Haram, and some of the infiltration that are taking place already, from across their own border to Nigeria, it will be certainly an attraction for them. And that's why we have to put some preemptive things in place now. Maybe apart from the diplomatic effort, the multinational joint task force also we need to expand their role in that direction to help to be a blocking force for such a movement from Chad towards Nigeria.
Well,
thank you very much.
Talking about those preemptive measures, General, I recall earlier when you were speaking, you said there were some things we left undone that maybe if we had done them, we'll probably not be in such quagmire as we are right now. If you don't mind, could you, maybe give us some some specifics. Because in the course of speaking, you said that we needed to build system of systems. The challenge in my head is systems are built by people and run by people. Now, we still have those systems. Who is going to build these systems? Who is going to run these systems in a way that we will not find ourselves where we are right now in another 20 years or 60 years from now? Because somehow we got here. We have to get out of this, out of where we are now, and then how do we ensure we don't get back there?
Yeah, thank you very much, Ayo. I think you are bringing me to one point that we have often not spoken strongly about. I think it boils down to what I call the classical conspiracy of the elite class itself. And when I say the elite, I'm talking of the whole gamut of the elite, the political elite, the educated elite, the technocrats. I think we all need to come to a point where we agree that, look, so far we've been living in denial. So far, we've not had the common good and the national interest in our hearts in making many of the policies, even the crafting of systems that we're talking about. Let's take, for example, in other climes, let's take just one example of improvement of the take-home benefits of political office holders. Okay, I've seen in some country, if a president is going to increase the benefits of a president, he, as the sitting president, who is doing it, will not be a beneficiary of it. Now, that's a smart way of crafting a law, not to make it something that will be based on self-interest. It means once the president knows that he is not going to benefit, so he will think again if he knows that he's not a beneficiary of what he's trying to put in place. But in our case, we make such laws, and the sitting person who is making it is the first to benefit from it. So these are deliberate things. And you can't run systems that way. A system must be run to plug loopholes. But more often than not, we exploit the loopholes in our systems. We, rather than plugging in, rather than studying, reviewing the existing and perfecting it so that the system can run better, we simply exploit those loopholes to our personal benefits.
Do you want to give examples of situations where that has backfired?
Oh, very well, very well. I'm just giving the example of benefits. Let's look at the way we run some of our institutions. Like my own sector, for example. Mm-hmm. I think we're all still suffering from what I call the KBAC mentality, where we don't want to be constrained. We want to do what we like, how we like, when we like, and if we like. So you find, if I'm in an office, I don't want to offend so many people.
No, please go
the
ahead.
examples in my head. Mm-hmm. Let's take, for example, a given office where you get there and you discover that the existing standard operating procedures of that office are not helping the system. But they help the man who is sitting on that seat, because that gives him a field day. He has ample opportunity to maneuver and manipulate the system. And so nobody touches to fine-tune how that office is run. Because everyone that comes say, oh, it gives me, I can operate like an emperor here with this leverage. Not sufficient rules to put some limits of exercise of power in place. Okay? And so I stay there and I run my own tenure, and the next person comes. And because it's to the benefit of whoever is sitting on that seat, it too will not touch it.
But everybody else around them, know that this is affecting us adversely.
Yeah, but they're not in the position to change it. And they're not in the position to craft that particular system there.
Is that in any way,
That's what has been happening most of our things. That's why we are still where we are.
But General,
most of the time, it's not that the person sitting on that seat doesn't know that the system there can be improved, but it's enjoying a near zero system that he met.
But General, isn't that in some way putting a question mark on our recruitment process generally, from the leadership to the followership to the engine that runs government, which is the civil service? Can you hear me, General? I'm asking, if that doesn't, what you just said now, if it doesn't put a question mark on our entire leadership recruitment process, from the leadership to the policymakers to the civil service, which are supposed to execute those policies and laws that are created.
Yes, of course it does. I mean, that's why I call it I say it's a complete elite class that is in conspiracy in this matter. Okay. Because we like to do what is convenient for us to do. You know, anything that will put more strain and task us beyond limit, we don't want to. And if nobody is enforcing it, we just leave it. And more often than not, I'm thinking of an example that is that is not that is not going to put anybody in trouble, because I just look at it's all over the place. It's all over at headquarters, for example, there are supposed to be standard operating procedures of what to do. Okay, let me give this example. When I was in the War College, there was a colleague who was writing a paper. Okay, and the paper required that he had to go to a particular ministry and get their national policy. Okay, he got to that ministry, and they couldn't find a copy of the national policy. So then you then ask yourself, how the ministry that national policy is meant for, they couldn't find a copy. They had to tell him that he should go and come back. So now that's an example. So you then ask yourself, so who wrote the policy and for who, and who is using it? And then at the end of maybe a 5-year, if it has a periodical review, we will sit down and say we are reviewing something that we actually have not used. Whereas what it should be, like when I talk about system of systems, is that there should be a procedure when a policy is churned out, whether it's an act or it's a policy, administrative policy or a legal document, there should be a procedure for reception, for dissemination, for assimilation, for review. And that review should be an annual review. That should be part of the forecast of events of the different bureaucratic offices that are concerned, so that at the end of, if it's a 5-year review, it should just be a collation of the annual reviews that have been done to review that document when it's due for review. Okay?
Well, General,
that's not what we do in most of the cases.
Well, General, one can say that is perhaps a given, you know, in itself. But then there was an example you gave earlier. I'm wondering, how come we're not fighting the insurgency and all levels of insecurity we have the way we fought the Civil War? Now, the Civil War had a military government in place. And now we have a civilian government in place. Are you sure it's a good comparison? Because, I mean, you know, when the military wanted to do anything, it was just, it's a command structure. But here is a democracy. Can we really compare?
Thank you very much. Well, the way crises are managed, the decision about war, it's still a political decision. It wouldn't matter whether it's a military regime or a civilian regime. I mean, it was one of the former presidents of France, Georges Clemenceau, who said, and I quote, that war is too serious a business to be left to the generals. So, end of quote. So it's not a function of whether it's a military regime or a civilian regime. Again, it boils down to processes and procedures. You know, the process of deciding to go to war, the process of deciding how to engage in national security challenge is purely a governmental thing. So it doesn't matter who is in government. If the process and procedures are there, then they should be applied. They should be activated. Okay, so the challenge again is, what procedures and processes do we have in handling such challenges? Have we activated them? Have we updated them? You know, based on, I mean, the fluidity of security challenges, you know, and the changes that are happening in the security environment since the Civil War to now. And then that's the question we should be asking. And that's the area we should be looking at. So it's not a matter of who is in power. It's a matter of a system that we're on.
And I'd like to focus on that for a bit. I mean, you said it that war is too serious a business, according to that quote, to leave it to just generals. And by inference, it will mean that we're not really losing this battle on the field. I mean, the loss started way before our men probably responded to calls or attacks by the insurgents. So if we were to start fixing this the right way, because I think a lot of attention has been focused on the men on the field and the rest, who should be championing this systems of system change? Because clearly if we don't sort it, then we'll keep recording the losses we see on the battlefield.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's a good one. When it comes to crisis management, it goes beyond even the Ministry of Defense. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs is also involved. There are all the security-related ministries, departments, and agencies. There should be an interministerial, interagency committee that will tackle these things with everyone bringing on board, their own core competencies to prefer solution. And then, of course, once the solution is preferred at the level of National Security Council, then the different agencies for implementation will then take it off from there. That's, just giving an abbreviation of how such a system should run, okay? So, and let's take, for example, when I talk about the Civil War, there was a whole propaganda machine during the Civil War, which was championed and headed by the Ministry of Information. And thank God we still have one of the super PAMSEC alive, who was the PAMSEC of Ministry of Information at that time. And they did a fantastic job to keep Nigeria together. Okay? Right now, I've not heard of anything like that. And so the enemy has a field day in their own propaganda, and we don't have a counter-propaganda. We simply react. We simply react. And more often than not, even when we are reacting, we are simply lying. Simply lying. And it doesn't solve any problem. It doesn't help anything. We should be able to beat the insurgents, even at the level of propaganda, information warfare, psychological operations. All of this should be deployed concurrently.
I think this, interestingly, ties back to... Right, pardon me. I think this ties back to the point you were making earlier about fighting this as a nation, coming together. Because if we don't do this as a nation, then clearly we might not win this. But over time, or let me just say in recent times, we've seen states looking inwards and saying, well, we need to protect ourselves. And you've seen the security outfits that have come as a result of that. We just had Ebubago. In fact, I think a state in the South also mentioned starting its own security outfit. So clearly, states are beginning to do this individually. Well, some say they come together. But do you think this helps that fighting it together as a nation? How much of an impact do you think this will have on fighting this insecurity as a nation?
Yeah, sure. I welcome the idea of regional security outfits. They should have their own place in the entire security architecture. Now, so the issue now is rejigging the security architecture itself, reviewing it, incorporating such efforts in the appropriate place within the cadre of that architecture, and making sure it links within the system so that there's no disjoint, and then it will have an overall positive effect, no doubt. But if these things arise on their own and they are not integrated into that security architecture and given the proper place to ensure that we can benefit from that effort, not clandestinely stifling them, but rather giving them a good space where they fit in and their own effort can complement the government's effort. I think it's a good idea, great idea.
General, yesterday the Benue State Governor made some comments. Interestingly, the Minister of Defense also made statements at the State House, some of which we have on the front page. But for the Benue State Governor, he believes that, the government has been complacent or complicit, if you will say. He said the actions or inactions of the government has largely been responsible for what we have seen. He mentioned whether you call them killer herdsmen, bandits, kidnappers, or whatever. He believes that the federal government at that level is complacent to a large extent. So I'd like you to listen to it just to put it in context and get your response to what the governor of Benue said.
The action and inaction of government is clearly demonstrating that they have adopted what these people are doing. As far as I'm concerned, Boko Haram, Fulani herdsmen, ISWA, ISIS, all of them are working towards the same goal in Nigeria. Let nobody deceive me. So that is it. And as long as Nigerians do not take this serious, they started as herdsmen. Then now they are called one bandit. But why are they not being declared terrorists despite all our previous pleading and appeals and begging?
Well, General, so that was part of what Governor Samuel Ortom spoke about yesterday. What are your thoughts on that?
Thank you very much. Well, you know, the governor is speaking from his own perspective. The truth is that nobody has all the facts. We are all like 5 blind men describing an elephant, each one describing the portion of the elephant he touched. So it's not, no one can fault another person's perspective because it's the person who is wearing the shoes who knows where it pinches. Of course, as a professional, the way I will see it will obviously be different. But in the final analysis, what needs to be done should be done. I think that's the long and short of it. And like I keep saying, let's bring everyone that has something to offer on board. And let it be a national effort that is not just so, but seen to be so. Let there be, you know, a rally. Let it even be a rallying point. I mean, it's known from history that when there is a general problem like that, it makes the people of a nation, either it's a community or a society, to ignore their differences in order to face a common enemy. If we use that, it will even be a way of galvanizing Nigerians towards unity, okay? And so the issue of sectionalism and all of that will surely be debunked by such national effort. You remember the slogan during the Civil War that was created by General Gowon then, that to keep Nigeria one is a task that must be done, you know. And that became a rallying point. And so it elicited the cooperation of everyone to know that, look, this is a national issue. We must address it together, collectively. So that's my advice on that. Thank you very much.
Well, General, I don't know if you ever saw this in terms of how, in terms of the disparity, as I mean, you just said that the point of the Benue State governor was making is his own, I mean, from his own perspective. However, you know, because of perspectives like that, it is becoming more and more difficult for us to have a consensus on how to approach this myriad of problems. From your own perspective, because it's your own perspective that you provide, how do you think that is hampering the fight?
Yeah. Thank you very much. It's obvious to everyone that we've not given this challenge our best shot yet. It's obvious. Of course, if we have, then, I mean, Boko Haram from 2009 to now, we should have at least diminished their power to still hold ground or to still be able to fight. Let me touch on that a little, because when you look at it, I'm going to quote one of my friends, is my namesake, Baron Antoine-Henri de Jomini, in his Art of War. He wrote that for any nation, any government, to put its military, to disregard its military under any pretext whatsoever, is to prepare that military for disgrace and the nation for humility. Okay? When, I mean, like I said, the things that ought to have been done that have not been done. Because equipping your armed forces is not an overnight business. It's not a one-time thing. You plan a program to say, look, what kind of wars are we going to fight in the next 15 years? What are the challenges? You do your threat analysis, you do your risk assessment, you do your environmental security assessment. You put all of those things together and say, look, who are likely to be our enemies in the next 15, 20 years? that way. And then so what kind of armament, weapons, and equipment do we need to fight the kind of battles or wars that will be fought in those years? Then you begin to equip your armed forces accordingly over a period of time, 5, 10 years. That's how it's done. So if we didn't do that, if we had done that, I was privileged as a field commander at the time to see some of the fantastic reports that the SSS write about security situation in the country. And of course, they are fantastic, very professional guys there. And they do those the work. But of course, the final decision of what to do with them is the political masters. Okay, so if only all along, even things like Boko Haram, all the time when they were just like a sect, preaching some, inflammable things, there were reports on them. Nobody took those reports seriously until they broke out, until when Muhammad Yusuf was killed, and then they became violent and all of that. So these things, that's how they happen. So failure to do certain things in the past is what gives room to, the thing coming back to hunters. Okay, so if we now have to address those things, of course, it's now a state of emergency. Again, one of the things I said about the way the civil war was addressed, do you know that there were only 5 battalions of the entire army before the civil war started? 5 battalions. At the end of the civil war, we had 4 divisions, which means there was emergency recruitment, emergency commission to meet the requirement of that war. So why are we not doing that now? Are we saying this one is not as serious as the Civil War? And yet it has lingered this long?
General, big questions. When you say that, we ought to have been planning at least 15 years ahead, one will say now that we're currently embroiled in the crisis that we're embroiled in, how are we going to plan for what will happen 15 years on? Big questions. But we have to thank you for always taking time out to speak to us anytime you're called upon. And we hope that you won't get tired of speaking. It's a job that we have. Thank you so much for coming on Sunrise Today this morning. Retired Major General Henry Ayola as a former commander of Special Task Force Operation Safe Haven. Sunrise Today continues.
Thank you very much for having me.
Sunrise Today continues in a moment. Please stay with us.
Well, most certainly that issue isn't going away, just easily like that. And of course, Honorable Yusuf Gagdi, who spoke in that comment, in that report that you saw, we invited him hoping that he'd be able to at least give us a better understanding of what he meant when he said Nigerians should have reported him to the National Assembly and the DSS. And if what we have heard about the process of getting someone into office is anything to go by, the kind of background check that the DSS does before anyone is as much as nominated, much less appointed, I don't know where we left off.
Oh, yes. And speaking of the presidency, the presidency has since responded to that controversy. Just yesterday, we had the senior special assistant to the president, Mr. Garabashew, speaking about it, saying that the Minister of Communications and Digital Economy, Dr. Isa Ali Ibrahim Pantami, is currently subject to what he calls a cancel campaign instigated by those who seek his removal. Goes on to say they do not really care that what he may or may not have said some 20 years ago, that is merely, goes on to say that is merely the instrument they are using to attempt to cancel him, but they will profit should he be stopped from making decisions that improve the lives of everyday Nigerians. Ends by saying that the administration stands behind Minister Pantami and all Nigerian citizens to ensure they receive fair treatment, fair prices, and fair protection in ICT services. So that gives you a sense of what the presidency is thinking at this point, saying, well, we stand behind him, and well, that's the position right now. But a lot has happened, and just in case you have missed this, let's walk you through really what has led to this point, because I think most of it happened on social media, and clearly not everybody sees that as a place of abode. Maybe you drop in once in a while. So let's just walk you through. This started, well, it was April the 11th. First, there was a Daily Independent report, and that followed a retraction. It was followed by a retraction, which you see there by Newswire, and of course, Independent also retracted the story, which, of course, spoke about the minister being on a certain terror watch list for alleged ties with Boko Haram. So that's the retraction you see from Newswire. And the minister responded, interestingly, on April the 12th, saying that the reaction, or rather the retraction through independent investigation has been noted. But he spoke about, lawyers having to, meet with the news agencies and all that. So that was the response of the minister at that point. And things seem to have died down to a certain extent.
And
but then
the Daily Independent also retracted.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
The very, very next day, saying, the disquiet and everything. Attention has been drawn to the story with the above title published on Sunday Independent newspaper of April 11th, and of course that's the retraction as well. That is that one, and of course you still also have that investigative piece of April 15, unmasking a jihadi masquerade, and of course this gentleman, David Funde, was a guest on Politics Today, and he reiterates a lot more of the same thing he has said in that one.
Yes, so this was now the new dimension to this whole story entirely. And that got the minister to now apologize after this investigative piece by David, saying that some of the comments that he made some years ago that are generating controversies now were based on his understanding of religious issues at the time. And he has changed several positions taken in the past based on new evidence and maturity. So that was on April the 17th, on Saturday at a mosque. And that was an apology, which was quite different from the position he had earlier on that got the dailies to retract.
And then the battle seemingly went to the social media.
Oh, yes.
And a number of people have pretty much pitted camps.
Oh, yes.
There's the Pantami Resign Now camp, and then there's the Pantami Will Stay camp. And these are some of them.
So this is the first one. This one is the Pantami Resign Now camp, saying that age has everything to do with radicalism. We've seen old and young turn suicide bombers. Pantami saying that he was young when he held those terroristic ideologies. Is it no excuse at all? And of course, you see that hashtag Pantami Resign Now.
And Onyedika also says, Kemi Adeosun resigned over forgery. Stella Odua resigned over corruption allegations. Everyone condemned them, and none asked for forgiveness to continue as minister. Pantami's case wouldn't be different. A supporter of Taliban and Al-Qaeda, and that hashtag again, Pantami Resign Now.
So another person that pitched his tent with the Pantami Resign Now camp is this one, Ayo Shoguro, saying that now that Issa Pantami has renounced his extremist ideology, he shall do the right thing and resign from office. If he truly wants to make up for his past, he shall continue the work of engaging and radicalizing young jihadists, not handle national affairs.
Well, the perspective of Festus Ogun in this one is interesting. He quotes a law. Pantami risks life or 20 years of imprisonment, or both, for supporting and aiding terrorism by virtue of Sections 5 and 18 of the Terrorism Prevention and Amendment Act of 2013. So, apart from resignation, Nigerians should demand for his prosecution. But this is Nigeria. Pantami resign now.
So,
then we flip sides.
Oh, yes. So those are 4 tweets from the Pantami Resign Now camp. But, of course, you had the Pantami Will Stay camp as well. So take a look at this one from Yasir Arafat saying that the northern phenomenon is a Pantami giving online and offline terrorists a sleepless night, ensuring a comprehensive database through NIN, securing the nation, and placing it strategically for digital economy advancement, tested and trusted, an achiever, he says.
Arewa Twitter says, people saying Pantami resign are very funny, to be honest. They have forgotten that ICT removed Nigeria from recession single-handedly under the watch of Issa Ali Pantami, best minister in history.
And there's more. Serki says Sheikh Pantami has been the subject of attack from the media and Twitter page trolls since he was given an appointment by President Buhari. He goes on to say, stay strong, you'll come out stronger. Pantami will stay and people will celebrate your success.
And Haji Shehu says only terrorists want Dr. Issa Pantami to resign because he wants to block their easy access to communication. Calling for his resignation will not work. No room for terrorism in the communication sector. Hurry up and link your SIM with NIN before the deadline. That's the deadline, I guess. Pantami will stay.
Interestingly, the People's Democratic Party also waded in on this one and said that the party asked the DSS to invite the minister for questioning and asked the president to sack the minister. And I mean, this went on and on. And till we got that response from the presidency just yesterday. It's a lot, really, but we have tried to at least give you a sense of what has played out. Clearly, there's so much angles to this, but at least to bring you up to speed, as they say, with these issues. But we're joined this morning by a legal practitioner just to get a sense of what the law has to say in this matter, because so much has been said. And Mr. Malaki Ugumadu joins us this morning virtually. He is a legal practitioner, immediate past national president, Committee for Defense of Human Rights. Good morning, and thank you for joining us on Sunrise Daily. I'm sure you've been following this from the scratch. So let me begin by asking you first your thoughts.
Well, my thoughts are that here we are again as a nation, conflicted between desire to just carry on or make fundamental changes in a way that restores our dignity and secures our nation as a safe political environment. There are many angles to this whole issue, and I believe that if we have enough time, perhaps we'll be able to, put them in the right perspective. But permit me to say straight away,
Okay, we'll work on getting Mr. Ugumadu back. Do we have you back?
yes.
Okay,
Sorry
we'll
about
definitely.
that.
Okay, please go on then.
Patani, the Minister for Communication and Technology, looks to me as one of the young or youngest, if I'm not mistaken, members of the Buhari Executive Council. And the fact that these allegations and challenges are around him now poses an additional question on the viability of youth engagement in leadership and politics in contemporary Nigeria. Now, the argument has oscillated between
Playing a tricky one on us, but we'll keep working to get Mr. Malaki back, just to get the legal perspective to this.
I have no control over what is happening now.
It's okay. We understand. Please go on.
If I can continue. Yeah. The argument has oscillated from, I didn't make this statement on the basis of which the media house, Daily Independence, retracted this statement. So, no, sorry, I didn't mean what I said, or I apologize for what I said, on the basis of which the present investigative write-up, particularly from what Mr. David, ensued. The angle to it is first to be humble about the situation. Humble in the sense that our nation, our country has
Okay, looks like one of those days where you have to literally battle the connection just to get the guests back. Looks like one of those days, but we'll keep working at it. We'll keep ensuring that we get Mr. Malaki to speak on this. Don't forget, we did invite Honorable Yusuf Gagdi, which you heard speaking earlier on about the DSS or the National Assembly missing that, and asking questions about Nigerians as well, saying, Well, Nigerians should have also written to the National Assembly saying that, well, we noticed this and this. That as well generated a lot of controversy, which is why we invited him to give some more context to that, because, I mean, people thought, I mean, that's why we have the National Assembly and the DSS.
Well, if we all had to do that work, then perhaps we don't need elections. We don't need to, we could all do the job ourselves. I mean, that's the thought in the heads, that would be the thought in the heads of so many people. If you were recruited to do a job and you're asking me, I should have done the job that I recruited you to do. I mean, exactly where is this supposed to go? But
let me play, I wouldn't say the devil's advocate here, but I mean, let me just flip side. I mean, we call it a democracy. People should be involved in government. So yes. I'll just, you know.
Our first leg of involvement, Kayode, let me butt in right there, is to recruit people to do certain jobs.
But you shouldn't go to sleep after that, right?
No, we don't go to sleep, but we don't expect, we should sleep longer than some people. I mean, that's why they are there, you know. And, you know, electioneering hasn't ended simply because, you know, we recruited some people. The reason why people do what they do is so that they can take care of other things. For instance, why do you recruit a messenger or a cook or whatever? These are things you're supposed to be able to do yourself. But because you are busy doing other things, you engage some people to do some things for you. That is why the National Assembly is there. And gratifyingly, he actually, you know, we hope that we would be able to have him, but then, unfortunately, he's unable to make it. However, the legal angle to this conversation is very, very important. In what ways would we say that the gentleman has breached any law, any official constitutional provision? Someone has already talked about the Pantami angle, the Anti-Terrorism Act and all of that. So I guess we have Mr. Malaki Ogumadu back. So, Wells, could you go ahead and conclude your thoughts on the first leg of this conversation?
Well, I was already in two minds whether there's any situation affecting me since we are discussing communication and telecommunication. I have no control over those happenings. I apologize. The point I was making is that we have moved forth and back from, I didn't say this, on the basis of which a retraction was made, to, wait a minute, I apologize, I was only a young man when those statements credited to me were made. And I'm better off now in terms of age. I'm more advanced now. I'm more mature. And I see the mistakes that have been made. So for me, we need to take the latter position, which is an apology. An apology presupposes that one, that statement was made, and two, that the author of that statement or the person to whom that statement was credited realizes the mistake that was made and therefore apologized for that. If that is the situation, we must therefore narrow the scope of the discussion beyond the wide, very elaborate positions taken by people whom I think are mere prophets. Because as it is, we haven't seen this man come out either on the national television or a written position to state precisely what the issue is, other than the apology that he tendered. Now, why do I say it has to be narrowed? It has to be narrowed because the minister to whom this statement was credited has, to a large extent, accepted that he made those statements. Now, are those statements capable of inflaming or aggravating the state of our security in the country? Yes, they are. Yes, they are capable. As a matter of fact, and that is where Kayode started, the law under the Cybercrime Prohibition and Prevention Act 2015 prohibits expressly statements such as this, particularly if it has the potential or capacity of annoying, causing danger, inconvenience, insult, injury, or criminal intimidation, particularly or hatred. You recall that this statement had words like infidels, describing people who have no similar religious belief as infidels and so on and so forth. The law
is clear about that and prohibits this under Section 24 of the Cybercrime Prohibition Prevention Act 2015. It is no less an offense under the Terrorism Prevention Amendment Act of 2013, which was earlier promulgated in 2011. So for a minister of the Federal Republic of Nigeria to be associated with these kind of inflammable and highly inciting words, and I understand that the position of FEC, as communicated yesterday by the Minister of Information, it also, and as well as the media aid to the president, have not helped the matter at all. In the sense that, on the one hand, the person who has been credited with this statement has apologized. You have come out right from the meeting of the Federal Executive Council to trivialize the enormity of what has happened, and over which the person has apologized in a way that further infuriates the people of this country who are now the victims. Now, let's face it bluntly. It is that this situation that we are quarreling about has direct nexus with the security situation in the country.
Well, you know, Mr. Malaki, I mean, that's a very vital point you make. But recall that after FEC, the Minister for Information was asked if that case was discussed, and he said it wasn't discussed at all. I think the minister attended virtually. That's the Minister for Communications and Digital Economy. It was after that, that was yesterday on Thursday, that the President's aide, Mr. Garba Shehu, now released a statement saying that the presidency is behind Mr. Pantami through all of this, and it was a vote of confidence, as it were. But when you spoke about that provision in the Terrorism Act, can that provision or that part be enforced retrospectively? Because, I mean, it said that those statements were made at least 10, 15 or more years ago. Can that be enforced retrospectively?
Kayode, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Correct. If we find today credible evidence of who murdered, who killed Delegiwa, the prosecution will start. The duty about criminal justice system, the administration of criminal justice, is that there are no time bounds against the commission of any offense.
Let it be clear, Mr. Gumadu, just a moment. The Anti-Terrorism Act was from 2013. Yes. What the minister said some 20 or more years ago. So one is older than the other. I think that's the point Kade is making here. So can a law that was just recently promulgated be held against an offense committed much longer than before the law came?
Thank you. Thank you for entering that caveat, because I was responding precisely to what Kennedy posed as a question. Now, if it is from your own point of view, as I understand it now, there is a very clear legal position to that. You cannot prosecute any person in Nigeria for an offense that does not constitute a crime as at the time that act was committed. I am referencing the fundamental rights provision of Section 36, not Section 12.
Okay.
So you have a valid point there.
Okay. Now, what do you say then to those who are saying, the PDP, for instance, which is saying that DSS ought to invite the Honorable Minister for some questions based on these allegations? What do you make of it?
Well, I'm not going to toe the line of PDP, essentially because I know what their roles are in this country and when they take position. But please, on this particular matter, I have also heard you in your remarks say that I think they were echoing what the Honorable Member of the House said, that no person ever remembered that while this man was being screened, you know, as a Minister of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. You see, we must find a way of exiting all of these games in a way that enables us approach some form of solution to the problems that we have. I say this because this whole style or pattern of shifting the blame to the Nigerian people who are the victims of the failure of leadership in this country must end. Okay. You have a minister whose statement has been regretted and apology tendered, and you're saying, why was there no Nigerian who raised this point? What was the responsibility of the Senate at that material time? What about the State Department of State Security that ought to conduct serious background check on all of these people to be able to highlight these aspects of these gentlemen who are put forward for their appointment? You know, there are insecurity killings everywhere, and some governors are saying, come, you go get whatever you need, defend yourself. Why do we have the armed forces of the Federal Republic of Nigeria? Why do we have the law enforcement agencies? Why do we pay our tax to be protected by the Nigerian state?
All right.
In the event of such serious situations, we will all be asked to go solve our problems. Like you rightly put, why did we even have the election? Okay. Representative democracy envisages that leadership should be entrusted in the hands of representatives on behalf of every person who have elected those people to go and serve.
All right. Well, Mr. Ogumadu, we have to thank you very much for your perspectives this morning. Most certainly something to celebrate. Malaki Ogumadu is a legal practitioner as well as immediate past national president of Committee for the Defense of Human Rights. Once again, thank you very much for your time.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
Okay. I have a few messages.
Oh, yes. I'll start with a tweet from Okeze Warwick. Says, this one is on the discussion we just had with Mr. Ogumadu, saying, if the government can let this slide, that means anyone that did a bad thing yesterday can come today or tomorrow and say that he or she has changed. The world is watching, he says.
Most certainly, and we are waiting. Next one is from Henry Wonono, who says, speaking medically, arresting bleeding starts with immediate resuscitatory measures while identifying its cause, source, repairing the associated damages, and done by experts. Are our strategies, equipment, personnel, and therapeutic measures most appropriate? Good question. Papa?
Well, Ifeanyi Okoha is talking about Nigeria's economy. He's saying that the interest rate policy would have been great, but for the exchange rate drop. Monies that used to be in banks for investments will be changed to dollars. There has to be a balance. Saving rates should be better to balance for inflation at least. That's what Ifeanyi Okoha was saying. And look at this one from Opola Damilola John. I was asking earlier when we were posing a question about electricity, what were you hoping to hear? Well, you'll certainly get an answer. Well, John is providing an answer this morning. He says, power needs to be taken out of the exclusive list. States that have capacity to generate more than 50 megawatts should be allowed to do so without transferring it to the national grid. Is that what is the cause of the issue we're experiencing today? Well, perhaps. I believe that this conversation will be ongoing as long as we do not have constant power supply, as long as power supply is erratic. You know, the conversation around electricity will not stop. And even maybe when it gets stable, we'll start talking about the pricing, but at least the tide of the conversation will change. This is where we are today. But we still urge you to stay safe and be kind at the end of the day. Thank you so much for watching this morning. I'm Maokwa Ogun Yusuf.
You know, ironically, they say power belongs to the people, right? Other irony. I'm Kayode Okikelu.
So you're saying power is taken from the people now. Am I Omakide? Have a wonderful day and a good weekend.